All learning.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hourly to Exit podcast. I am so excited. I have a wonderful episode for you today with JoAnn Holmes. And so welcome, JoAnn. Thank you so much for joining me.
It is my pleasure. I have the greatest respect for your work, Erin. Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm going to say this because during our pre-talk, you described yourself as Jo. Do you like Jo or JoAnn?
Jo sounds good to me.
Jo sounds good. Awesome. Thank you. So before we get into the episode, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So as Erin said, my name is JoAnn Holmes. I am an IP and digital asset attorney. I help clients in the Web3 space to monetize intellectual property and navigate the evolving Web3 legal landscape and negotiate successful deals. I manage intellectual property in about 140 countries. And over the course of my career, I have negotiated licensing agreements with companies like Disney, Microsoft, and the NFL. And what is very exciting at this stage of my career is to think about ways that we can create more egalitarian intellectual property-based wealth through the tools that are being created in the Web3 digital asset space.
Oh, that is so fantastic. There's a million ways that our work intersects, but one way that it absolutely does not intersect is the Web 3.0, which is why I'm so excited to have you here. I know nothing about it. And I first discovered Jo on the BizChicks podcast, where she was talking about Web 3.0. And it blew my mind. I had no idea that it was relevant to those of us in service-based business. And so I immediately reached out to her and wanted to get to know her and have her come and talk to us about it. So, but first regarding the BizChicks podcast, my audience knows that I'm a huge fan of Natalie and her podcast. And so in a shameless attempt to get her attention, since she famously does not accept pitches for her podcast, tell us how you got a coveted position on BizChicks.
Well, let me tell you, it was a huge honor for me as well. So I've known Natalie for a number of years now, and I listen to podcasts. If I'm not working, there's a good chance I'm listening to podcasts, and I'm always trying to learn because I am a business owner. I support business leaders. And so it is great for me to, as an attorney, have context for the way that entrepreneurs and people who've grown and scaled businesses have thought about that. Many years ago, I did a strategy session with Natalie, and I am fairly tough to hold my attention unless I'm continuously learning. And I've just consistently found that I've learned from her over the course of years of listening to her podcast. And so we have touched base and had experiences. We have daughters around the same age and have had some similar overlaps in family and places, parts of the country where we have lived. So it's just been a real joy and blessing to be a friend with her over the years. And when I got the nod, I was like, absolutely, tell me when and I am there.
Yes, that is absolutely a notch in the belt. So, and it was a fantastic episode, by the way. I will link to it in the show notes because it was so informative and definitely changed the way I think about Web 3.0. And so that is why we're here today. I had been willfully ignorant, like just absolutely like, no, when it came to NFTs or cryptocurrency or blockchain. I'm like, no. And so now I'm like, okay, Jo's made it accessible to me. I think I can learn this. So let's dive in and talk about it. I mean, typically I have kind of know where I'm going with something because I'm familiar with the topic. I will say I'm really not, everything I know about it, I learned from you on the BizChicks podcast. So I am going to, kind of just ask some pretty broad questions and let you take us from there. So first, what the heck is Web 3.0?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. And I'm going to borrow a little bit to set the table from Chris Dixon to talk about the transition of Web 1 out to Web 3, where we are or are rapidly approaching now. And I'd also like to share what I think of as the 5 tent poles of Web 3. So if we think about Web 1, it was read. Web 2 was read write, and Web 3 is spoken to be read write own. So if we go back to the early 2000s, late 90s, we were probably all excited that we could read the newspaper online, and that was literally just read. The web was effectively a digital magazine. And then we had evolution that was very much catapulted by mobile phones and the ability to carry around an instrument that allowed us to communicate with the world at all times. And so what that did is it moved us from just read to read write. So I could make a Facebook post, I could share a photo on Instagram, I could offer or purchase something through the Amazon marketplace. And so the result of that was that there were certain companies and their shareholders who gained most of the value from that phase of the internet. So those who were our centralized marketplace, or our Google as a centralized data resource, or Facebook as a central communication hub, those companies profited handsomely, but the people using those platforms did not so much, particularly if they weren't shareholders. So this next term of the internet is really focused on moving from what I just described to read, write, own. And that looks like creators starting to have more value in their participation. And so what does that mean? That means that you might form, for example, a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, and the members of the DAO get to vote on the products and services that they're building. They get to potentially own an NFT that has a value that could appreciate over time. That NFT might be an authentication tool to have access to the DAO. We are in the midst here in the United States of a lot of regulatory review happening in the space, but once we have more clarity, it may be possible for you to buy tokens the way that you buy shares of a company and have that asset appreciate or depreciate like any asset can do. So we're really moving into a space that is in many ways akin to the early internet, where the technology and building blocks are being built out. There is admittedly volatility associated with that, but there's a lot of room for discovery and for people with talent to come into the space and think about how they would want to contribute. So that's a sense of how the internet has evolved. In terms of the tent poles of Web3, there are 5. So the first is cryptocurrency. There are over 10,000 cryptocurrencies, but ones that people might be most familiar with might be Bitcoin or Ethereum. And those are currencies of digital networks that facilitate transactions through computers around the world. The second is decentralized finance. And so just like we have resources in the traditional financial system for things like making payments or earning yields on cash through like a CD or a money market account, or using collateral to get a loan. All of those things exist now in decentralized finance in Web3. So that's the second tentpole. The third tentpole we've mentioned, which are NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. And those are really digital assets that are a deed of ownership, like the deed to your house or your car. And then there's a thing that's associated with that deed. So you might have a physical piece of paper that's the deed to your house, but the thing associated with it is your physical home where you live. The same thing happens with NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. You might have a token that relates to a digital piece of art or a piece of sports memorabilia, or in the future, there will be NFTs that are, in fact, there already are NFTs that are linked to physical real estate. So non-fungible tokens are the third tentpole. Closely dovetailing into that, we just mentioned DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. So those are the new wave of corporations and LLCs where people come together from literally all over the world for a given purpose and with a common treasury or digital bank account. And so people might come together because they want to invest together. They might come together because they want to create a product or service. They might come together because they want to support a technology or because they want to support a charity. And the members get to vote and participate in making decisions around how that organization is going to operate and how they're going to use the treasury funds. So that's the fourth tentpole. And the fifth and final is the metaverse, which is this broad virtual interaction that we are all having and will have all over the world in online spaces. So for those who have kids, maybe your kids play Roblox or Minecraft, and that is a Web 2 version of the metaverse where corporations own those games and all of the assets, the skins and swords and all of the things that are used to play or build in those spaces. And a Web 3 version, instead of those skins, for example, or clothing or shoes or what have you that people might be using in Roblox and Minecraft. Instead, those are going to be NFTs, and they're going to be assets that ideally would be interoperable. So you can take them out of one game setting and use them in another one, and they will have value just like other types of collectibles, for example, such that if other people want to own that skin, you've got the really cool I don't know, athletic gear, or you've got the really fun sneakers, right? That NFT could continue to have appreciating value because it would be yours as opposed to a skin in Roblox that you really would be most likely offending the terms of the game if you tried to take them out and use them as an asset to buy or sell elsewise. So again, if we just do a quick recap, and I know I shot a lot of information at everybody.
We might need to have a handout to go with this one.
The tent poles of Web3 are cryptocurrency, which is the monetary unit, decentralized finance, which is the corollary to traditional finance, NFTs, which are certificates of ownership for all kinds of different assets, DAOs, which are the organizations of people all around the world who come together to work on a given purpose, and finally the metaverse, which is the virtual space that people do and will in the future come together in to collaborate and interact with one another.
All right. So one of the things that's always confused me about cryptocurrency, a lot of things confuse me, but about cryptocurrency in particular, where does the original value in the cryptocurrency come from? Like, is there something behind it, or is it how, like, you tell me, like how does the value get in to cryptocurrency?
Absolutely. So I know that you share this with your audience, but as a fellow attorney, let me just remind everyone that what I'm sharing here is not legal or financial advice. And especially in a nascent and volatile space like Web3 and cryptocurrencies, it's a great idea to speak to your financial advisor or your legal counsel to get the kind of support that you need to make good decisions. There's a term in Web3 called do your own research. And so I'm a huge fan of people finding reputable resources and checking and double checking anything you hear from any one resource. As we're recording the podcast in the spring of 2022, there's a lot of volatility happening in financial markets, including the crypto markets. And so, Erin, to answer your question, where does the value come from? If we think back historically, humans have traded lots of things over the course of time to express value. And we as Americans now use a standard monetary unit called the dollar, and it is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. But it's also backed by the fact that we believe that dollars have value. There are people all over the world whose nations have currency that is not as stable as we have been fortunate to enjoy here in the United States. So effectively, any monetary unit is going to be the result of people believing that it has value. As I mentioned before, there are over 10,000 different cryptocurrencies. And so it might be useful to break them down into two types. So one type of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, ETH, Sol for Solana, all of these are going to be the coins of a blockchain. And what is a blockchain? It's open source software that serves as a digital ledger. And so if I wanted to pay you for creating a piece of digital art, then you would set a price for that. And we would use our digital wallets to be able to transfer that. And one of the ways that we might transfer your digital art for my monetary compensation is through using ETH, which is the coin of the Ethereum network. Ethereum blockchain is a network where people are able to conduct transactions, right? So it is, again, just a blockchain. It's just open source software. We all interact with open source software every day. And the currency of a blockchain is going to be its coin. The coin of Ethereum is ETH. The coin of Bitcoin is a little confusing because it's also called Bitcoin. The coin of Solana is going to be Sol. Outside of that, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies that are not coins because they don't have their own underlying blockchain, right? So they might be built on Ethereum, or they might be built on some other blockchain. And so when we're thinking about where does the value come from, it comes from the core economics of any monetary unit, and thinking about, is there scarcity, or is there a finite number, or excuse me, an infinite number of the cryptocurrency? Bitcoin, for example, is coded such that there will never be more than 21 million of them. So the value in a cryptocurrency is going to depend on things like people's belief that it has value, network effects of people coming into the space and being willing to pay for that coin or that larger cryptocurrency as it goes up or down. It's going to depend on the utility. So Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain network, has a lot of traffic because lots of developers are building applications on that blockchain. And so anytime there's popularity in an asset, then there's going to be potentially price appreciation, right? So there's no one simple answer around where the value comes from. And for a lot of reasons, including regulatory uncertainty, there are people who are going to feel most comfortable staying out of the space. But if you are willing to do your research in any given cryptocurrency, and one is not the same as the next. It is worthwhile to do your research, understand why any given cryptocurrency has the value that it does. Look at how it has trended over time. Look at what macroeconomic factors impact its value, and maybe start, if you're going to get into the space, with no more than you are willing to experiment with to learn and understand whether it's a good space for you to participate in terms of an investment asset.
Wow. Okay. Got it. Why so many? Is it like everyone, like, were they specific to different types of industries or locations, or all of the above? Or?
It's because anyone can spin up a cryptocurrency at any time. You and I could do it right now. They don't have to be backed by anything. And so because we're talking about over 10,000 different assets, it's like saying, why does this stock have value, right? Like there are so many stocks that are traded on different markets across the world that have different value in a market, and that value is going to go up or down over the course of time. And so it's really necessary to, again, do your own research and understand, what are you investing in? What are the reasons why it has the value that it does? What are the reasons why that value might fluctuate? Stable coins, for example, are one of the fundamental currencies of the Web3 space because they are supposed to be pegged to the US dollar or the euro or the yen. But even stable currencies can have differences in the reasons why they maintain their value or they don't. And so there's not one way to explain cryptocurrency at large. There absolutely are scams and bad actors. And so I always encourage people to spend some time and learn the space. Don't succumb to FOMO. Don't jump in because someone told you to. Understand that with any nascent technology, and we are still very much in the early stages, there's going to be a lot of volatility, and even people with good intentions are going to sometimes make bad decisions. And so I think where our money is, we tend to have attention. Understanding your risk tolerance, maybe not gambling anything you can't afford to lose, but just understanding the space. And if you feel more comfortable, for example, amongst the listeners to say, I don't really know that I want to earn a cryptocurrency, but I think there's promise in this technology, then maybe you invest in traditional stocks that offer products or services to the Web3 space. So there are many different ways that you can have exposure in this space. It all depends on what you want to achieve and what your confidence level is in keeping abreast of how the space evolves.
Now, I know you're not going to make a prediction, but do you think that generally that as this area matures, that automatically lots of these are going to just fall away, and that one or two or a dozen or whatever it will kind of rise to the top and be the standards, and everyone else will just be kind of go the way of the Betamax?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great analogy there, Erin, in that we don't know which technologies are going to prevail. I mean, I've earned my living for over 20 years as an IP and technology attorney. And so this is something that I'm just fascinated by personally. And it's something that I am so interested in that I've pivoted my career to focus in this space. But that having been said, I don't know that anyone can say with absolute confidence that we know which technologies are going to win. In the earliest stages of my starting to use the internet consistently in the late 90s and early 2000s, I couldn't have imagined how integrated the internet would become into our lives. And in effectively every facet of my day, from waking up to going to sleep, there's something I'm doing that's an engagement with the internet. I couldn't have imagined Airbnb and we'd go live in strangers' homes on vacation, or that we would get in the car with strangers using Lyft or Uber. And so I think the volatility and the unknowns are to be expected. And it's a question of what is your comfort level with the unknown and how much risk is any one given person willing to take. I think there are absolutely many cryptocurrencies and many technologies, frankly, that are going to fall off over the course of time. Some things might be ahead of their time. And so I think that it is just an issue of, again, some people want set it and forget it. They want to buy the S&P 500 and they want that to be the end of their investment participation. And others want to be at the avant-garde of technology. And so it's really a question around, where is your risk tolerance? What are the things, where are you interested? Where is your natural curiosity? Are you someone who wants to go down the rabbit holes and learn those 5 different tent poles? Some people, don't have an interest in investing in certain aspects of Web3, but do others. Some people will work for a DAO, for example, but they don't buy or sell NFTs. I own, as I speak to you now, exactly 1 NFT. And I bought it not as an investment. I bought it because it was another Black woman whose focus is to bring more women of color into the Web3 space. And I just wanted to support her because I believed in what she did. I wasn't expecting I would be able to retire off the asset. I was just trying to show my support. There are people who work, as I said, in DAOs because they want to be able to create something that they don't have a way to be able to participate in creating in our traditional business ecosystems. There are people who are in DAOs because during the pandemic, certain doctors were able to support patients through using maybe Oculus or Meta's virtual reality glasses, or there are so many ways that are promising and fruitful, and I think will be beneficial to society. There are others who I think do not have good intentions and are taking advantage of the fact that we're in the early stages of this. But I think, based on having listened to your podcast, that your audience is a pretty savvy group. And so finding good resources, I'll give you one, for example. I'm a visual learner. I really like to go on YouTube and watch Whiteboard Crypto because they draw out concepts and then I can understand, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. Or there's a new idea that I got just introduced to. Let me go read or listen to a podcast or watch something on YouTube or talk to people in my peer group and try to explore that more. I've dedicated a lot of time in the space and it's still always a learning process.
Wow. Okay. So you have mentioned DAOs a few times, and that was one of the things that really kind of struck me when I first heard about you. And so let's double back on what that is. And so you made the analogy to, LLCs and corporations. Are they legal entities?
It depends. So, Erin, you and I imagine that we are not dissimilar in that our first duty as counsel, as attorneys, is to think about putting our client's best interest first. And so that is called our fiduciary duty. And so when I am speaking to my clients, my very first intention is to protect them and their personal assets and their families. The reality is, when people come together for a common purpose with a bank account, which is the way that DAOs are sometimes simplified, in the absence of having some kind of company wrapper, like an LLC or a corporation, the default is going to be to a general partnership under the laws of the United States, which means there's joint and several liability. You have liability for what the other members are doing, and you don't have control over what the other members are doing. And the reality in the US is that we are a very litigious society. And so effectively anybody can sue anybody for anything. It doesn't even have to be a just claim. It can be a claim that then a court has to decide whether it should move forward. And so when I am speaking to, and I'm very fortunate that in my work, I am speaking to people who have good intentions in this space. One of my first thoughts, if they're talking about a DAO, is that risk exposure of a general partnership. There is an ethos in the Web3 space that is very much grounded in community. And so there is a balancing act between respecting the ethos of the space and the reality that law still applies. And so, one of the things that might happen is, and we're still very early, the Biden administration issued an executive order for regulatory bodies across the federal government here in the United States to take a look at digital assets and think about how we can have effective and useful regulation of this space for the protection of all kinds of people who are coming in and participating in Web3. So from the perspective of thinking about the laws that apply and what DAO members want to be mindful of, there's two things. There's a regulatory or statutory side. You've got agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the CFT, what is it? What's that last piece? The CFT, the
FTC, Federal Trade,
not the Federal Trade Commission, CFTC. Consumer Financial Protection.
Okay.
Bureau. That's it. Sorry,
Yes.
Got my acronyms off there for a second. But there are a number of US federal regulatory agencies who are looking at this space. Then you have a thing called the plaintiff's bar. And for the audience, what that is are attorneys who are plaintiffs who file lawsuits and really look at that gray area in the law and how people are acting, and will use our legal system to argue through whether someone has behaved in a way that's in compliance with the law or not. So what that means is we've got the regulatory side of things and the litigation side of things that both in real time are impacting the evolving legal landscape in Web3. So going back to thinking through DAOs, when I'm speaking to people who are interested in DAOs, my first principle is protect yourself, protect your members, which is a good reason to set up an LLC or a corporation, depending on what the objectives are. There is in the state of Wyoming a concept of a Wyoming DAO LLC, and that is a version 1. The litigation, or excuse me, the legislation that set that up is it's a reflection of the fact that in the United States, our given states serve as incubators to try new theories and see how they work. And so it's not something that I think is without its flaws. But if we fall back to what we're accustomed to in terms of LLCs and corporations, as long as someone is doing the things that need to be done to maintain the protections of those kinds of organizations, that is something to think about. So what does that look like? A group of people come together and say, we want to create a product or service and offer it to a marketplace. Okay, well then it's a good idea to have a conversation with an attorney about setting up an LLC or a corporation so that you are doing business through the protection of that entity rather than exposing yourself as general partners. I've mentioned a few times that DAOs are a group of people with a common cause and a bank account. That bank account is referred to as a treasury, and most often it is a digital wallet on a blockchain, right? And there's cryptocurrency as the assets in that treasury. Well, some people have authority to move money in and out of that treasury. If you are someone who is a leader in the DAO, particularly if you are someone who has authority to move funds in and out of that treasury, you have a higher target in terms of your risk profile if you're acting outside of the protections of an LLC or a corporation as a DAO member. So that's all the more reason you want to think about protecting yourself. But there are some new innovative things that I cannot speak to the audience and say are without risk, but are closer to the safe side of regulation. And so one good example that I like to use is Beyonce, because I like Beyonce. So there are several different Beyonce fan clubs. And let's say Beyonce said, I'm going to create, her fans are called the Beehive. So if Beyonce said, I'm going to create a Beehive DAO, and I'm going to take 5% of my ticket sales from a concert, and I'm going to put that money in the treasury of the Beehive DAO. Now, she might say, I want my fans to participate in raising funds for the treasury as well. And so if you would like to buy an NFT of me from my concert, right? And an NFT is a non-fungible token. It's a deed of ownership linked to some kind of asset. So the asset might be a photograph of Beyonce on stage, or even a video of Beyonce on stage that you can only buy if you buy this, and it is your authentication tool into the Beehive DAO, right? And the funds that you paid to get that digital piece of art of Beyonce, all those funds are also going to go into the treasury. So let's say theoretically she's given 5% of her ticket sales to the Beehive DAO, and people have bought NFTs to remember their experience at her concert that they want to keep in their digital wallet and maybe show at their house to flex with their friends that I was at the best Beyonce concert ever, right? So let's say $10 million have been raised for the Beehive DAO. Now, if you own that NFT, then you are a member of the Beehive DAO, and you might get to do things like vote on what charities the Beehive DAO should support. Beyonce has supported other up and coming artists, right? So maybe some portion of the treasury, the membership will vote and say, we want to support this artist, and we're going to give some component of the funds to launch this artist's career, who we all believe in. It might be, we know that Beyonce has a partnership with Adidas for her Ivy Park athletic line. It might be that there's one piece in that line you can only buy if you are a member of the Beehive, right? So that's a product service link. It might be that when she's on tour, there is a closed audience of 20 people who get to meet with her before or after the concert. But the only way that you can get access to that, group of 20 people who can see her is if you're a member of the Beehive DAO. So effectively what we've done is not looked to create a security, not something that's akin to a share in a corporation, but something that gives members a component of governance around how that treasury runs, a piece of access to the celebrity, because it'd be super cool to get to see Beyonce before or after a concert, and an opportunity to buy a product or service associated with her that only members get access to. So in some ways, it's a more modern form of a fan club. And over the course of time, once we have more regulatory clarity, there might be tokens associated with being in the Beyonce fan club. And maybe those tokens trade on a marketplace with value that appreciates or depreciates. There's a lot, going back to the Airbnb and Lyft examples of the early stages of the internet, there's a lot we don't know right now. But the example that I was making around the ethos of Web3 being community value within the regulatory guidance that we have now, as we're speaking today in the spring of 2022, that example of Beyonce being who she is with her corporation that I'm sure is very well organized, and having an arm that is a DAO that gives her truest fans an opportunity to feel like they have a more meaningful way to connect with her. That is one of the current creative ways that DAOs can be used.
That is awesome. So